1, 2, check. Something ain't right. 1, 2, check. Yeah. 1, 2. 1, 2, check. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Come on. 2, 3, check. 1, 2. Coming out through it. Yo. Yeah. What's going on? Can y'all hear me loud and clear out there? I just want to know if y'all can hear me. Can y'all hear me out there? Ooh-wee. Can y'all hear me out there? Is it like any feedback, anything like that? Is it like anything crazy? Check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, yeah. Let's get this thing going. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, boom, boom. 2. All right, good. It's not slamming. Took it down some. Perfect. Thank y'all so much. Also, don't forget, I've been working on a new tip jar. I had to shorten the tip jar for y'all because some people was like, it's too long. Well, guess what? It's not long no more. And guess what else? It's pinned to the top. Oh, yeah. So y'all can just hit that link at any given time. I want to see something. Yes, sure. Why are they sending me stuff? All right. Let's go. Who am I? Perfect.
A storm is coming.
Hey, yo, lesson here, babe. You come at the king, you best not miss.
Oh.
Of all the under the table shit they doing. I'm tired of fingers pointed at me. I'm tired of all this weight on me. I'm tired of everybody want a piece of me. Shit, I'm not an ATM machine. What do I do when I can't do what I do? How can I win if I can't win with true? Got a couple of dead homies that I promised I would make it out this shit. And I know that God's hands is on me, nigga. I'm gonna make it out this shit. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. And I claim it. Storm's over. I admit I talked to Miss McGlynn. FYI, that's my second mother. I admit that I asked her, how am I gonna get the world off my shoulder? She said, son, don't you lose it. Sometimes you gotta go through it. They can say what they say, but at the end of the day, they cannot deny your music. Cause your music has touched people. It inspired all people overseas, everywhere. Don't worry, don't care.
Yo, can I with you? What?
ACT, you see this?
Look, if it ain't official Dana J, Levi for Kelly, Prima Donna News, I don't even want to see it. Take the phone. Look, you got some weed? I gotta get some. All right, hurry up. Diesel and them here, everybody here, we waiting on you. All right.
But I know that there's more. More for you, more for us.
DJ discretion.
Flow still sick, I ain't talking that pandemic.
DJ discretion.
Flow still sick, I ain't talking that pandemic.
DJ discretion.
Flow still sick, I ain't talking that pandemic.
Say you love it, what you gon' do now? Hope you're ready, cause I'm really about to put it down. Girl, you know that I don't ever never disrespect you. We love tomorrow, but tonight I want to spank you. That ass down, gotta make it last down. Start off slow, then I'ma beat it up.
Cause the anointing is on you, and that's why these haters is at you. So just keep on doing you, baby. You don't have to give these fools an explanation. I admit it, I made it. I admit it, I did it. I admit it, I did. I admit it, I did it. What's the definition of a cult? What's the definition of a sex slave? Go to the dictionary, look it up, let me know, I'll be here waiting. Now I admit I got some girls that love me to pull their hair. And I admit they love me to talk dirty when I pull their hair. Yeah. Some like me to
What's going on?
Some like to get brain. And what some of these girls want is too much for the radio station. Look, I'm just a man, y'all. Not a monster or beast. But I admit there are times when these girls so fine, I'll chill to the nigga for a week. Now I admit I love Hugh Hefner, and through the years supported Hugh Hefner. But when he left this world, he had a million girls, but we gon' always love Hugh Hefner. To Jim C. Regardless or whatever your name is. You've been trying to destroy me for 25 whole years. Writing the same stories over and over and over again. Off my name, you done went and made yourself a career. Well, guess what? I pray for you and your family and all my other enemies. I'm not gonna let y'all steal my joy. I'm just gonna keep on doing me. Now I don't know what else to say except I'm so falsely accused. Tell me, how can you judge when you never walked in my shoes? So easy to mess up someone else's life through social media. The devil in disguise. I admit I miss my brothers, but I admit they wasn't acting like brothers. Yeah, we've had our differences, but you don't turn on your brother for nothing, for no one, nada. Mama Joanne is watching. She must be turning over in her grave. Yeah. I admit I had to borrow a couple of M's from the label. All these hits out, but I couldn't put food on the table.
What's up, Lil Mac?
I was told I had to sell my cars. I was told I couldn't get a loan. Said I owed $20 million to the IRS, and they was coming to get my home. I admit I was feeling stupid staying in the Homewood Suites. Disrespect. Sipping Hennessy, trying to figure out what happened to me. There was so much going through my head, cause I knew that something wasn't right. I just couldn't put my finger on it, but my spirit had better eyes. It told me what it saw, and it scared the shit out of me. It said get rid of them all, it's nothing but vultures around me. I admit that I love my fans for all the push and support they've shown. I admit if it wasn't for them, I would have never stayed strong. Now I'm not tripping on all of these rumors.
That don't bother me.
And I'm not paying attention to these haters.
That don't bother me.
But what blows me is when certain people turn phony. They say, Rob, I got your back. Rob, you the man. But they really doubting me. Bitch, you know who you are. Bitch, I bought you a car. Bitch, you stayed at my crib. I loved you with all my heart. Now, I don't like to brag when it comes to me, but I've given back to the community. From the non-profits to the charities. But of course, you never hear that about me. To them niggas that drink my liquor and smoke my stogies.
Talk about it.
How come you ain't on Facebook taking up for me? When you're around me most of the day, and you know that I'm a good brother. Always got your hands out, it ain't no doubt that y'all niggas ain't nothing but blood suckers. Plus, y'all ain't bringing nothing to the table. Yeah, nigga, and you know it's real talk. Taking pictures with me for your Instagram, but when I need you, you're quick to get lost. No. Ooh, Robert J. and Joanne, my kids, what you're hearing out here about that? Guys, I'm sorry for this. I'm so sorry, I can't imagine what y'all must be going through. Every day it's something about me, my God, it must be killing you. I promise there'll be better days. Just keep walking straight. I know you must be worried, but just know that I'm okay. For me, things has gotten rough. Right now I can't say too much, but for y'all I will stay tough. Daddy just need y'all to trust and believe in me. I admit that I've told the truth, and I'm still not free. Still won't hate me, they still won't stone me, still won't chain me, think they won't kill me. I admit it, I admit it, I admit it, I did it, I admit it, I did, I admit it, I did.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
No disrespect to Chi-Town, my home, but we've gotta learn how to support our own. I admit that my heart cries for my city, cause we're losing young lives in the city. Instead of judging me, y'all should be using me to help these kids, raise them out of depression and poverty. Now I'm not saying I'm no savior, but I could be an inspiration. This is an invitation. Man, I admit I go through so much day to day. Got 23 lawyers, 3 or 4 managers. What am I doing? Show me the way. The only thing I have left is my voice. And now I have to use it for my protection, because they left me no choice. See, my work has nothing to do with my private life. So stay the fuck out of my business and tend to your own damn life. So go ahead, say what you wanna say about who I wanna date, but you won't say that shit to my face, cause you know it ain't shit to say. Next nigga bring me some dumb shit, it's gonna be a misunderstanding, cause niggas that listen to dumb shit are niggas that be on that dumb shit. They need a life cause they ain't got no life, so they always caught you in a dumb shit. Blocking my path, they don't know the half and so they making assumptions. Since when do assumptions cost a man his whole career? Found guilty when you're innocent is the only test I feel. There is one thing that's for sure, and I wanna make this shit clear. I done left my voice and represented my country for 31 fucking years. Damn it, I admit.
Let's go. What up? I'm quite sure y'all seen the other people celebrating what's going on. I'm quite sure y'all see it. But this is not what they're going to give Robert. We don't know what they're going to give him or try to. However, this is the defendant, Robert Kelly's sentencing memorandum. This is what they are saying. If he had to get anything, we know it should be nothing. But you have to put a number down based on the charges. And we're going to go through that. So let's go. Defendant Robert Kelly's sentencing memorandum, part 1, by Jennifer Bonjean, Ashley Cohen, Bonjean Law Group, not Bonjean, Bonjean Law Group, PLC. Introduction. Defendant files this preliminary sentencing memorandum in support of his contention that the guidelines range for his convictions is 168 to 210 months. That's anywhere from 14 years to 17 and a half years. And he's already done 3.5. So anywhere from 14 years to 17 and a half years. Defendant further contends that upon consideration of the factors set forth in 18 U.S.C. 3553A, this court should sentence defendant to a below guideline sentence. So this is what it would be at guideline sentence, that or more or life. But you see, they're saying defendant, this court should sentence defendant to a below guideline sentence, consistent with this court's order. Defendant intends to submit a supplemental sentencing memorandum on June 13th, 2022, that addresses the 3553A factors with supporting mitigation that sheds light on the history and characteristics of the defendant. Argument A. District court should begin all sentencing proceedings by correctly calculating the applicable guidelines range, which should be the starting point and the initial benchmark. Gall versus United States case law. After a proper calculation, a sentencing judge considers the 7 factors set forth in 18 U.S.C. 3553A, the nature and circumstances of the offense, and the history and characteristics of the defendant. The 4 legitimate purposes of sentencing as set forth below, the kinds of sentences available, the applicable guidelines range itself, and relevant policy statement by the Sentencing Commission. The need to avoid unwarranted sentence disparities among defendants, and the need to provide restitution to any victims. 18 U.S.C. 3553A 1 through 7. See also Gall 552 U.S. at 50 and 6. In determining the appropriate sentence, the statute directs judges to impose a sentence sufficient but not greater than necessary to comply with the purposes of sentencing, which are A, to reflect the seriousness of the offense, to promote respect for the law, and to provide just punishment for the offense. B, to afford adequate deterrence to criminal conduct. C, to protect the public from further crimes of the defendant. And D, to provide the defendant with needed educational or vocational training, medical care, and other correctional treatment in the most effective manner. 18 U.S.C. 3553A2. The guideline sentence in this case is 168 to 210 months. Pay attention. The guideline sentence in this case is 14 to 17 and a half years with all the charges running concurrent. The government and probation argue that the defendant guidelines range is life, although they take different routes to arriving at that conclusion. As set forth in detail below, many of the enhancements suggested by the government and probation are simply unsupported by the evidence and the law. Defendant argues that the range is 168 to 210 months. Probation sets forth a comprehensive summary of the charges, convictions, and evidence presented in this case. Defendant has already lodged objections in response to the pre-sentence investigation report, including objections to some of probation's statements about the government's evidence. Defendant will highlight that the trial record in this case as necessary below. Defendant was convicted 1 count of RICO based on conduct alleged to have occurred between 1994 and 2018. The base offense level of the racketeering offense is the greater of 19 or the offense level applicable to the underlying racketeering activity. USSG 2E11 application. Note of the commentary guideline 2E11 instructs that where there is more than one underlying offense, treat underlying offense as if contained in a separate count of conviction for the purposes of subsection A and 2. Defendant calculates the offense levels for each racketeering act as follows. Racketeering Act 1, robbery, base level offense 12, adjust offense level 12. The government and probations contend that a two-level enhancement is justified on the basis that defendant used a person less than 18 years of age to commit the offense. As argued in defendant's Rule 29 motion, the government's evidence failed to show that defendant knew that Demetrius Smith paid money to influence a public aid officer to produce an identification card for Jane Doe number 1, Aaliyah. The record is also devoid of any evidence that defendant the record is also devoid of any evidence that defendant used Aaliyah in connection with the robbery. Oh boy, I know they don't want to hear that. Of course, the robbery committed by Smith produced a fraudulent public aid card for Aaliyah. Oh, a fraudulent public aid card. Oh, so wait a minute. Where's the marriage certificate? Where's the marriage certificate? The record is also devoid of any evidence that defendant used Aaliyah in connection with the robbery. Of course, the robbery committed by Smith produced a fraudulent public aid card for Aaliyah. Not a marriage certificate, but a public aid card. Like I told y'all, and those folks was like, nuh-uh, it was a marriage certificate. I was in court. I know what they said. That marriage certificate that they showed was not authentic. But it did produce a public aid card. But it does not follow that defendant used Aaliyah in the robbery. Accordingly, defendant objects to a two-level enhancement pursuant to USSG 3B1.1a. B, Racketeering Act 2, sexual exploitation, Stephanie. Base level offense 32, adjust offense level 32. The government and probation argue that a two-level enhancement is appropriate pursuant to USSG 2G2 1B2A. Jesus. On the grounds that the offense involved the commission of a sexual act. Defendant was found guilty of sexual exploitation based on Stephanie's testimony that defendant recorded a sexual act with her when she was 17 years old in violation of 18 USC 2251A. The government contends that because sexually explicit conduct, an element of a 2251A violation, does not necessarily involve a sexual act. Oh, wow. Defendant is subject to a two-level enhancement pursuant to USSG 2G2 1B2A because he engaged in a sexual act with Stephanie. Defendant disagrees. Enhancing defendant's sentencing based on facts that form the basis of the offense amounts to impermissible double counting. Impermissible double counting occurs when one part of the guidelines is applied to increase the defendant's sentence to reflect the kind of harm that has already been fully accounted for by another part of the guidelines. United States versus Watkins. That's the case law. The only conduct proven by the government that qualified as sexually explicit conduct was the sexual act. Even if the government could have theoretically proved sexual exploitation without evidence. Hold on. Okay. Without evidence of sexual act, It does not follow that the government can enhance the penalty based on conduct that was already accounted for in the base offense level. Accordingly, a 2-level enhancement is unwarranted. C. Racketeering Acts 3 and 4, kidnapping and Mann Act violations, Sonia. Defendant was acquitted of Racketeering Acts 3 and 4. Well, Robert Keller said that he was charged with all accounts. Well, Racketeering Acts 3 and 4 is a count, ain't it? Kidnapping and Mann Act violations. Defendant was acquitted of racketeering. Wait a minute, let me say it again. Defendant was acquitted of Racketeering Acts 3 and 4 related to Jane Doe number 3. The government contends that because it could prove these racketeering acts by the lower preponderance of the evidence, they could be taken into consideration pursuant to United States versus Vigoro, 100 F3D 284 2D Circuit, 2nd Circuit, 1996. Defendant contends that where the jury clearly found that Sonia's testimony was not credible, this court should not consider Racketeering Acts 3 and 4 and calculating the guidelines range. Despite the government's contention, it does not ask this court to consider these acts in calculating the guidelines range. Whew. Racketeering Act 5, Mann Act violation, Geronda. Base offense level 24, adjusted offense level 24. The government urges a 2-point enhancement pursuant to USSG 2G13B2 because the offense involved undue influence toward a minor to engage in prohibited sexual conduct. Undue influence is defined by the guidelines as activity that compromises the voluntariness of the minor's behavior. ID at CMT. The defining characteristic of undue influence is that it involves a situation where the influencer has succeeded in altering the behavior of the target. United States versus Patterson, 576, F3D 431 443, 7th Circuit, 2009. The government contends that a rebuttal presumption of undue influence exists because defendant was greater than 10 years older than 16-year-old Geronda when they engaged in sexual activity between May 2009 and January 2010. Contrary to the government's contention, defendant rebutes the presumption of undue influence. The trial record refutes any suggestion that defendant did anything in altering the behavior of Geronda. Whoa. The trial record refutes any suggestion that defendant did anything in altering the behavior of Geronda. Quite the opposite. Geronda, a sophisticated 16-year-old, took great pains to get close to defendant, including by misrepresenting her age. Defendant did nothing to seek out Geronda. In contrast, Geronda forged a relationship with people in defendant's orbit, falsely claiming to be 19 years of age, all to get access to the defendant. Geronda admits that she falsely told defendant that she was 19 years of age when they engaged in sexual conduct. It is true that Geronda claims that she promptly confessed her real age of 16 to the defendant immediately after, not before, not well before, but after their first sexual encounter. However, even if this is true, Geronda's testimony does not reveal that defendant used any influence, undue or otherwise, to engage in sexual activity with her. Defendant has been sufficiently punished for this offense, and a 2-level enhancement for undue influence is simply not justified on the facts of this case. Similarly, a 2-point enhancement is entirely unjustified pursuant to USSG 2G31B3, where the record is devoid of evidence that the offense involved the use of a computer or cell phone to induce the travel of the minor. The government points this court to phone logs, random photos, and a single text allegedly from defendant stating, "Please call," as evidence of use of a cell phone to induce travel. This evidence fails to show that defendant induced Geronda to travel to her home. The record shows that Geronda traveled to defendant's home with no invitation and at her own violation. Indeed, the evidence showed that Geronda snuck into defendant's home when defendant was not even in town. Defendant did not induce Geronda to travel to his house. Furthermore, no records exist to establish the nature of any communications. Indeed, Geronda's testimony does not support the government's argument that she was ever induced to travel to his house by cell phone communications or any manner. An invitation does not equal inducement. The Second Circuit has made clear that the terms persuade, induce, entice, and coerce are words of common usage that have plain, ordinary meanings. United States versus Waker and United States versus Gagliardi. The court distinguishes this conduct from merely asking, which is not sufficient to demonstrate criminality, i.e., recognizing that there might be some uncertainty as to the precise demarcation between persuading, which is criminalized, and asking, which is not. The government's evidence fails to show any specific words of persuasion that defendant used in connection with Geronda. Thus, even if the government could argue that defendant asked or invited her to come to his home and told her that someone would pick her up at the train station, that conduct is not inducement. Thus, a 2-level enhancement is not supported by this record. Last, a 2-point enhancement is unwarranted pursuant to USSG 2G31B4. The government continues to argue that because a violation of 18 USC 2422 does not necessitate illegal sexual activity, an enhancement for sexual contact does not amount in duplicative punishment. The government's argument is flawed, where Racketeering Act 5 is premised on a criminal sex act, namely aggravated criminal sexual abuse under the Illinois Criminal Code. In short, to prove Racketeering Act 5 as charged, the government was required to prove a sex act. Thus, any enhancement based on a sex act is duplicative to the charge offense, and the enhancement amounts to double counting, which means they could not prove it. Racketeering Act 6, forced labor, Geronda, base offense level 30. Damn. USSG 2H41B4B2, adjusted level offense 32. Good God Almighty. That's life right there. Jesus. As the government pointed out, probation's calculation of the adjusted offense level for this count is erroneous, where the count did not include the production of child pornography. Although the defendant agrees with the government that the base offense level is 30, he objects to a 4-level enhancement pursuant to 2A3.1B1 because the government's evidence did not establish under any standard of proof that the forced labor count involves conduct described in 18 USC 2241A or B. As argued, Excuse me. As argued extensively in defendant's Rule 29 motion, Geronda's testimony described an assault unrelated to any sexual conduct. Geronda testified that defendant slapped and choked her because she was on her phone and he didn't believe she was texting a friend. R176. Geronda testified that after the assault, she gave defendant oral sex because he instructed her to do so. Geronda's testimony is devoid of any mention of threats of violence or acts of force in connection with the oral sex act. The previously described physical assault was completed and unrelated to his instruction that she gave him oral sex. Geronda did not even testify that she feared defendant when he asked for oral sex and she complied. Thus, the government's claim that defendant placed Geronda in fear of death or serious bodily injury is meritless. Accordingly, a 4-level enhancement is unjustified on this record. Base level F, Racketeering Act 7, sexual exploitation of a child, Geronda. I said of a child, Geronda. Base offense level 32. Adjusted offense level 32. The government agrees that there's no evidence that defendant used force in connection with the production of any child pornography and that a 4-level enhancement is inappropriate. Stop. Rewind that. The government agrees that there is no evidence that defendant used force in connection with the production of any child pornography and that a 4-level enhancement is inappropriate. Which means what they have in Chicago is CGI. If New York is saying, and New York have the tapes, allegedly, that there's no evidence that defendant used force in connection with the production of any child pornography and that a 4-level enhancement is inappropriate. So pretty much you're saying that there's no force in connection with the production of any child pornography. Well, there's no evidence of child pornography or production or force to make a production of child pornography. Make it make sense. If there was a Geronda on a tape, if there was a sex tape, that would have been child pornography, right? But the government agrees that there is no evidence that defendant used force in connection with the production of any child pornography. If they would have had a tape with Geronda on it, they would have hit him with child pornography. Evidently, they didn't hit him with it because what? There is none. So, defendant objects to a 2-point enhancement pursuant to USSG 2G3-1B3, where the record is devoid of evidence that the offense involved the use of a computer or cell phone to induce Geronda's travel. Racketeering Act 8, Mann Act violation, Jane. Base offense level 2G11A2, 14. Adjusted offense level 14. The government concedes that Jane misrepresented her age to defendant when she met him in Florida in April 2015, which kicked off a lengthy relationship. Incredibly, the government seeks a 4-level enhancement on this count, arguing that defendant committed a fraud in connection with this Mann Act violation because he did not disclose to Jane that he had genital herpes. What? The government seeks to stretch the guidelines beyond all recognition, which explains its failure to offer any support for its novel theory that the failure to disclose a herpes diagnosis amounts to fraud, either as defined by federal fraud statutes, state statutes, or under common law. According to the Second Circuit, fraud involves a false representation, scienter, reliance, and harm. Evans versus Adamo case law. United States versus Fusion Connect case law. Citing the restatement second of torts. While there have been a few variations of these elements, harm is always present. See page V. Carosa and V. Carosa, 167 BR 331, Eastern District, New York, 1994. Breaking scienter up into reasonable, calculated to deceive, and intend to deceive. The government's evidence does not show that defendant falsely represented anything to Jane, or that Jane relied on any misrepresentations. Also absent is any evidence of harm, because there's no evidence that Jane was affected with herpes when she traveled to California with defendant between April 28, 2015 and May the 1st, 2015. Wait. So Azriel don't have herpes? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. The government cannot show that any harm resulted from his failure to disclose his herpes diagnosis. Indeed, Jane testified that she did not contract herpes from defendant during this trip. Thus, the government's fraud theory is patently ridiculous. A 4-level enhancement must be rejected under this theory. So I guess herpes pick and choose, because a man that never been diagnosed with herpes, now all of a sudden he gave herpes to everybody. Now in court, oh yeah, he gave herpes to me. Everybody had herpes, but now when the evidence really shows nobody had herpes. H. Racketeering Act 9, Mann Act violation to Jane. Base offense level 24. Adjusted offense level 24. The government alleges that the base offense level for Racketeering Act 9 is 32 pursuant to USSG 2G21, which involves sexual exploitation of a minor by production of sexually explicit visual or printed material. Racketeering Act 9 was a Mann Act violation, and therefore the appropriate guidelines can be found at USSG 2G13C1. Pursuant to USSG 2G13C1, the base offense level is 28, where the jury determined that defendant was guilty of violating 18 USC 2422B. The government seeks to convert this offense into an offense for sexual exploitation of a child, arguing that the base offense level is 32. But the government fails to explain why this court should not look at USSG 2G1.3C1 as the starting point for correctly calculating the base offense level as to Racketeering Act 9, where defendant was not convicted of sexual exploitation, but rather a Mann Act violation. Notably, here we go. So how can he be a pedophile if he's not convicted of sexually exploitation? If he haven't been convicted of pedophilia, how is he a pedophile? Make it make sense. Notably, defendant was separately charged and convicted of sexual exploitation of a child in connection with video recording sexual activities with Jane during their trip to California. The government's theory fails for other reasons. At the time defendant purportedly committed Racketeering Act 9, Jane was living with the defendant and engaged in a legally consensual relationship in the state of Illinois. What I tell y'all last week on my main page, and the haters lied and falsely reported me and had it taken down. What I tell you, this is undisputed. No matter how distasteful the government finds it, there is nothing in the record that suggests that the defendant brought Jane to California for the purpose of producing a visual depiction of their sexual activity. Notably, the government previously argued that defendant's purpose in bringing Jane to California was to expose her to herpes. The government seems to believe that defendant's purpose in bringing Jane to California is whatever they say it is, depending on what elements it need to prove. As defendant argued in his Rule 29 motion, defendant's motivating purpose in bringing Jane to California was to have her companionship, even if it included sexual contact. While Jane testified that her relationship with defendant involved sex, that intimate relationship was legal in the state of Illinois. It is entirely illogical to suggest, as the government does, that defendant had a purpose in bringing Jane to California to have sex with her, where they shared a home in the state of Illinois, where the age of consent was 17. Make it make sense. I don't know why people want to text me while I'm doing this. Like, even if the government persuasively argued that defendant's purpose in bringing Jane to California was to have sex with her, it cannot be said that defendant's motivating purpose or any purpose was to produce video of that sexual activity. The government knows very well that defendant's travels with Jane had absolutely nothing to do with producing commercial child pornography. Oh, she's getting with their words now. Any attempt to increase the offense level under this theory is legally wrong. The government agrees that an enhancement pursuant to USSG 2G2 1B 6BI is inappropriate. Accordingly, the adjusted offense level for Racketeering Act 9 is 24. Racketeering Act 10, Mann Act violation Jane, base offense level 32, adjusted offense level 32. Defendant objects to a 2-point enhancement pursuant to USSG 2G2 1B2A on the grounds that the offense involved the commission of a sexual act. Defendant was found guilty of sexual exploitation in violation of 18 USC 2251A. Based solely on Jane's testimony, the defendant recorded their sexual activity in late 2015 when she was 17, almost 18 years old. Notably, the sexual activity that occurred in the Northern District of Illinois was legal conduct, even if the recording of it was not. The government's evidence turned entirely on Jane's testimony, as the government produced no video of defendant and Jane engaging in sexual activity during this time period. Oh, where's the 100 devices? Yeah. I told you, one day people going to listen to what I've been telling them. I'm not going to tell you nothing wrong. First, the government should not. The government's evidence turned entirely on Jane's testimony. The government's evidence turned entirely on Jane's testimony, as the government produced no video of defendant and Jane engaging in sexual activity during this time period. First, the government should not be permitted to enhance the sentencing guideline for this offense based on sexual contact that occurred in the Northern District of Illinois, since that contact was not unlawful. The unlawful activity in the Northern District of Illinois was the filming of the contact, not the contact itself. Therefore, this enhancement could only be applicable for any sexual contact in the state of California. But again, as argued supra, because the sexual contact that occurred in California arguably forms the basis of the charge offense, it would be duplicative to enhance this offense based on sexual contact, contrary to the government's argument, simply because sexually explicit conduct does not require proof of sex act for purposes of demonstrating a 2251 violation, where the government's proof of sexually explicit conduct is the sex act and nothing more. The government cannot enhance based entirely on a theatrical. Okay. Here, the element of sexually explicit conduct was allegedly proven by Jane's testimony that defendant produced a visual. Defendant produced a visual depiction of their sex acts. But I'm going to go here. The jury was not asked to determine whether Racketeering Act 10 was based on conduct in California or Chicago or both. Make it make sense. The conduct formed the basis of the charged offense and should not also serve as a basis to enhance defendant's sentence, notwithstanding that the government did not need to prove the sex act to establish a 2251 violation. Such an enhancement would constitute impermissible double punishment under the facts of this case. The government agrees that defendant's offense level should not be enhanced by 4 levels for pursuant to USSG 2G21B4. The government urges a 2-level enhancement pursuant to USSG 2G21B6, arguing that defendant stayed in touch with Jane by cell phone in order to induce her to travel to see him. Defendant and Jane were in a relationship, lived together, and traveled together. Defendant did not use a cell phone for any purpose other than communicating with his girlfriend. The government and the public may be outraged that defendant entered into a relationship with Jane, who he believed to be 18 when he was in his 40s. The government and the public may be outraged that defendant continued his relationship with Jane after learning that she lied to him about her age, even though in the state of Illinois, the relationship was lawful. But the government is clearly attempting to artificially enhance this sentence by ignoring the true nature of defendant's relationship with Jane. Put differently, if defendant had not traveled with Jane to California on an isolated occasion a couple of months before Jane's 18th birthday and had not video recorded his sexual acts with Jane, there would have been no racketeering acts as to Jane whatsoever. The government is free to feel more outrage about defendant's relationship with Jane, but it cannot enhance the sentence based on factors that ignores their own evidence. The government's fiction that defendant used cell phones to persuade, induce, coerce, and facilitate Jane's travel should be rejected, since it ignores the nature of their relationship entirely, and the base offense level already punishes defendant for his conduct. Accordingly, a 2-level enhancement pursuant to USSG 2G21B6 must be rejected. J. Racketeering Act 11, forced labor, Jane. Base offense level 22, adjusted offense level 22. The government now finds it convenient to charge its theory of prosecution to suit its sentencing arguments. The forced labor offense involves a base offense level of 22. As the government concedes, the heart of its forced labor count is the allegation that defendant obtained labor from Jane, forcing or threatening force against her in connection with sexual activities with other women and men, none of which occurred when she was underage. As argued in defendant's Rule 29 motion, none of which occurred when she was underage. That's why they hate Jennifer Bonjean, because all their lies are now being shunned upon. As argued in defendant's Rule 29 motion, there simply is no evidence, even from Jane, that she was forced or threatened with physical harm to participate in group sex acts. Her belated claim that she did not want to participate in such activities does not demonstrate the defendant forced her to engage in such activities through physical harm or threats of physical harm. That said, if this court concludes that the evidence established that Jane's participation in group sex acts amounted to an offense of criminal sexual abuse, the government's calculation of an adjusted offense level of 36 would be accurate. But as stated above, the government did not establish the defendant committed an offense of criminal sexual abuse in connection with Jane's group sex acts with defendant and others, because the record is devoid of evidence of force in connection with those acts. Stop. Why is the record devoid of evidence? What happened to the supposed to be evidence that was there? What up, Levi? What happened to the supposed to be evidence that was there? So it goes to show that everything I've been saying from day one has been spot on point, on cue. And they thought because they can get their criminal friends to take down my main page by lying, that was going to stop me. No. I'm going to get this truth out no matter what. Let's go to K. Racketeering Act 12, Mann Act violation. We talking about faith here. Based offense level, 14. Adjusted offense level, 14. And Levi said, hold on. Levi said, hey, you guys. And he put the heart up there. What up, Levi? Nikki started it off. What's going on? Hold on. Shout out to everybody that came in late that's still here. I appreciate all of y'all. Thank y'all for stopping by. Don't forget, if you want to drop me something because I'm not monetized, well, yes, I am. I am monetized on this page. Okay. Well, you can hit that little box that got the $sign. That's for the page, whatever, right? But if you want to, hit me, if you want to send me some lunch or something, or send me to get some lunch, then it's a little link called the tip jar, and I shortened it for this page. I shortened it. So I put it up, I shortened it, and I put it up at the top of the chat box. You just follow that link and donate whatever you feel free. Or you can hit the Cash App at $ official Dana J, and I will definitely split it. What up, Prima? What up, Ashley? What up, Marcia? What up, Lil TT? Let's get back into this motion. Again, the government has no basis whatsoever to seek a 4-level enhancement for fraud based on defendant's failure to disclose his herpes diagnosis to Faith. As argued previously, fraud involves a false representation, scienter, reliance, and harm. Evans versus Adamo, case law. United States versus Fusion Connect, case law. Okay? Citing the restatement second of torts. Okay. While there have been a few variations on these elements, harm is always present. See Page versus Carrazzo. Got that. Okay. The government's evidence does not show that the defendant falsely represented anything to Faith or that Faith relied on any misrepresentation. Most importantly, there's no evidence of harm since Faith did not contract herpes from the defendant. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Nikki M. Wait a minute. Wait. Did y'all just not hear that? Faith testified. Wait a minute, let's go back. The government's evidence does not show that the defendant falsely represented anything to Faith or that Faith relied on any misrepresentation. Most importantly, there's no evidence of harm since Faith did not contract herpes from the defendant. Goes to show she got it from her ex-boyfriend. Faith testified that after traveling to New York, she was diagnosed with herpes type 1 after getting cold sores on her mouth. That's herpes simplex 1. Everybody get it when the weather changes. So it says R2279 to 2280. Nearly 50% of the population has herpes type 1 cold sores. Facts. Even the government's expert would concede that herpes type 1 can be contracted from kissing. The record is devoid of evidence that Faith suffered any harm in connection with defendant's purported failure to disclose his herpes diagnosis to her. As such, a 4-level enhancement under a fraud theory is nonsensical. L. Racketeering Act 13, forced labor, Faith. Base level offense, 22. Adjusted level offense, 22. The forced labor offense involves a base offense level of 22. As argued in defendant's Rule 29 motion, there simply is no evidence, even from Faith, that she was forced or threatened with physical harm to provide oral sex to the defendant. Faith describes an episode in Los Angeles where defendant allegedly had a serious conversation with her and then directed her to give him oral sex. She does not describe defendant using any force or threatening any force. As a reminder, Faith never alleged that she was a victim forced to engage in any sexual contact and denied that characterization of her relationship with defendant. As such, defendant objects to the government's contention that this conduct involved criminal sexual abuse and that a base offense level of 30 is appropriate pursuant to USSG 2A3.1. That said, if this court concludes that the evidence established an offense of criminal sexual abuse, the government's calculation would be correct. That said, if this court concludes that the evidence established an offense of criminal sexual abuse, the government's calculation would be correct. Racketeering Act 14. Mann Act violation, Faith. Base offense level 14. Adjusted offense level 14. For the reasons argued in connection with Racketeering Act 12, no 4-level enhancement is justified under the government's novel fraud theory. That's all that was put. So that whole thing with Faith was fraud. N. Role enhancement. The government seeks a 4-level enhancement pursuant to USSG 3B1.1a on the basis that defendant was an organizer or leader of a criminal activity that involved 5 or more participants or was otherwise extensive. Defendant has argued extensively that the government failed to show the existence of an enterprise. The government's evidence showed that defendant was a famous entertainer who employed many people over the years. Defendant was unquestionably the boss of his employees, but the government falls far short of establishing that he was a leader of a criminal activity. Indeed, the government did not even attempt to prove criminal activity of the organization or other employees of the organization. A 4-level enhancement is simply not warranted here. Oh, minor in custody, care, supervisory control of the defendant. Brazenly, the government seeks to enhance defendant's guidelines range under a theory that Jane's parents entrusted defendant to her supervision when she was a minor, purportedly to assist her with her musical career, after which Jane lived with the defendant. The record shows that Jane's parents directed Jane to lie to defendant about her age and then encouraged her to seduce him in April 2015 when she was 17 years old. The record. But they said that was a lie too. The record shows that Jane's parents directed Jane to lie to the defendant about her age and then encouraged her to seduce him in April 2015 when she was 17 years old. The real-time text messages between Jane and her mother reveal that Jane's mother wanted the defendant to promote Jane's music career by commencing a romantic relationship with him. Again, the government seeks to sanitize the facts of this case, which showed that after Jane met defendant for the first time, she immediately began traveling with defendant and never returned home. Nothing in the record suggests that Jane's parents objected to this relationship. The evidence shows quite the opposite. Indeed, Jane's mother jokingly told her daughter weeks after Jane met defendant that her son-in-law was going to be older than her. Jane's mother certainly knew Jane's age, even if the defendant did not. The record does not show that Jane's parents entrusted defendant with Jane's care, as much as Jane was adamant that she wanted to live with the defendant in Chicago, and Jane's parents were eager to support her relationship with the defendant, presumably because they hoped financial riches would flow to them. It was defendant who sent Jane home after Jane disclosed that she was 17 years old. Regardless, Jane was not a minor in the state of Illinois at the age of 17 when she returned to Chicago shortly after her 18th birthday, as the government contends. As such, an enhancement under this theory cannot apply. Adjusted offense level. The following chart summarizes the defendant's position regarding the offense level for each group count. Defendant contends that racketeering acts 5, 6, and 7 should be grouped pursuant to USSG 3D1.2a, as should racketeering acts 9 and 10. Probation agrees. The government got a problem. Racketeering Act 112, Racketeering Act 232, Racketeering Acts 5, 6, and 7, 32, Racketeering Act 8, 13, Racketeering Acts 9 and 10, counts 2, 3, 4, and 5, 32, Racketeering Act 11, 22, Racketeering Act 12, counts 6 and 7, 14, Racketeering Act 13, 22, Racketeering Act 14, counts 8 and 9, 14. Defendant contends that the combined offense level is 35. The offense level applicable to the group, which is the highest offense level, is 32. Pursuant to USSG 3D1.4, the number of units that the remaining groups represent. The offense level should be increased by 3 levels, 3 units. for a total of 35. Because defendant's criminal history score is 1. The guidelines range properly calculated is 168 to 210 months. Conclusion: for the foregoing reasons, defendant's sentencing range is 168 months to 210 months, as will be set forth in defendant's supplemental sentencing memorandum. Defendant should be sentenced to a below guideline sentence. So, pretty much what's being said, for the people that don't know, that's like, yo, what what's going on? Pretty much what she's saying is the 14 to 17.5, the 14 to 17.5 years. That's what it would be if they gave him the guideline sentence. Because she's asking for the below guideline sentence. The below guideline sentence should be anywhere from 3 to 7 years. It's supposed to be half, or it's supposed to be half, or like 40% of each, something like that. So no, Bonjean, do not think Robert is guilty. You have to, as sentencing guideline, you have to give a number and you have to calculate it right. So when you calculate what's going on based on what they charged him with, because what you have to realize is, even though we know he's innocent, he was given a guilty charge. So what happens is they take all of this to the to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. And then if Second Circuit Court of Appeals don't do anything, it go to Supreme Court. However, with what's going on, if it reaches Second Circuit Court of Appeals, people gonna get in trouble. If it goes past Second Circuit Court of Appeals to Supreme Court, people, jobs, and heads are gonna roll. Hey, Ms. Virgo. So what's going on is everybody need to not think that Jennifer Bonjean believed that Robert is guilty. No. She have to go by what was left in her hands. So Ann Donnelly have a choice. She can either call for a new sentence or new trial before sentencing, or she can vacate it before sentencing. If she vacated, that's an acquittal. A new trial mean they going back to war, but it'll be with Bonjean. So I just felt like I need to explain that, because some people, oh my God, Jennifer Bonjean turned on R. Kelly. No, she didn't. No, she didn't. So nobody need to go jumping on her Twitter. Why you turn on R. Kelly? Why you say that? Do not be a nigga. If you don't understand, go to people pages that can break it down so that way you can understand. However, the best way of getting stuff broke down to you is if you read. Research. Don't just take my word for it. If I'm off, somebody say, well, Dana, that's not what Section 22B A69 36 Tekashi 69 say. You know what I'm saying? And then you state what it say. then I'd be like, okay, let me go back and read it. Oh, I was wrong. However, I'm highly wrong on this. I'm highly ever wrong on this. I'm always spot on. I'm always spot on. At the end of the day, that part right there, we speak truth over here. No question is dumb. Just ask, and we'll help you understand facts. I'm not the channel where Israel, where Azrael is pronounced Israel. No. I'm not the channel that's calling the Dream Team an enterprise. For what? What just happened is Jennifer Bonjean just boxed Ann Donnelly into the unforgivable box. Ann Donnelly got to make a choice. Do she turn on the government and do what's right? Or do she go through and follow through and then face the consequences later? That's all I'm saying. But look, I got to get up out of here, man. Y'all know I got to get up out of here. It's all good. I'll be back. So shout out to all of y'all, man. Dana J gone. See y'all later on before I hit the road. Peace.
Swimming in you. Hey, little mama said I wanna take a dip in your pool. Just go for a little dive there. Hey, yeah.
Wow.